So, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our much anticipated Taste and See event. I am Betsy Moe, a pastor and former mission co-worker for the Presbyterian Church USA. In that role, I worked for SEDEPCA for nearly 5 years. And for 2.5 of those years, I lived in Antigua, Guatemala with my family. And it is so great to see so many of you here, some of whom I've met before, maybe on a trip to Guatemala or through church. And then there are also a lot of new folks here. This is a sold out event, which is so great for SEDEPCA. There are participants from 26 states and 2 countries, those two being Guatemala and the United States. We all need good news right now, and to know that we are a part of something that is making our world better. So it is where we all want to be. So thanks for coming tonight. We thank you for your support of SEDEPCA, the Protestant Center for Pastoral Studies in Central America, which is providing a theological education that transforms to men and women in particularly vulnerable parts of Guatemala and Central America. You'll get to hear more about this awesome organization later in the program. So because none of us wants to sit and stare at our chocolate any longer, we are going to begin with Nico Silverman, our beloved chocolate expert, leading us in a guided tasting in the first 15 minutes. After that, you may continue to nibble on your chocolate through the second part of our program, when we will be hearing from Elizabeth Bell about the history and traditions of the breathtaking Lenten processions that are about to start in Guatemala. So without further ado, I want to welcome Nico Silverman. If you attended our last chocolate tasting in 2021, you may remember Nico, who is the U.S. distributor and good family friend of Diego's Chocolates in San Pedro La Laguna at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. We are so excited that Nico is able to join us again and offer his chocolate expertise. Who knew that chocolate expert was a job? I mean, I don't know if I would have majored in the same thing at college if I had known this. But Nico is here. He's always such a joy to work with. So thank you for being here. Now for this portion, you're going to need to have your chocolate, your glass of water, and your scorecard, which came in the package with your chocolate. It's on the back side of this. So this is your scorecard. Keep that handy. Get a pen, and we're going to have some time for questions after the tasting. So please feel free to jot down your questions, type them into the chat as we go. And just to optimize our tasting experience, remain muted and be sure to enable speaker view on your Zoom if you can, so you can follow along with Nico. So let's get to the tasting. Welcome, Nico.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're going to get right underway. It's a pleasure to be here yet again. I think this is our fourth or fifth collaboration, and I'm really excited to be sharing about Guatemalan cacao and chocolate with you all. So, as Betsy said, we're gonna get our chocolates ready and our scorecard and our cacao beans. Hopefully you all have your beans with you. And just a quick note on language. I say cacao, you hear many people say cocoa. I use cacao because it's the word that's used in Spanish, but you can consider them as synonyms. So let's try tasting something before we even get started any further to have some fun. If you take your bean, you can, of course, crack it with your teeth, but you can also kind of squeeze and turn, and that should allow you, it's going to be hard to show you, to separate the bean from the shell. The darker part on the inside is the bean or the nib, and the outer part is the shell. So these are cacao beans that have been fermented and dried, but not roasted yet. And it's kind of like eating nuts. And so I just take a little piece and enjoy. And you'll notice all kinds of nice aromas with this particular cacao. It's a bit fruity and floral. So, let me introduce myself real quick while you're munching on your cacao. You'll probably want a sip of water. Um, I have been working with these lovely folks at Diego's Chocolate since 2012. I met Diego while I was working for a company based out of Brooklyn, New York. You might have heard of it, called Etsy.com. It's an online platform for handmade goods. And as an employee there, I was running a project to see how Etsy could perhaps become a tool for economic development for artisans in developing countries like Guatemala. Connect the producers with the consumers in a more direct way and try to send more money to the hands of these amazing artisans. So long story short, the Etsy project did not last. The company decided to move on to other things. But I really wanted to continue working with Diego and his team. So I set up a little LLC here in the States. And with that, we've been importing and distributing and spreading the word about Diego's chocolate and Mayan culture through cacao and Guatemalan gastronomy. And that's what led me to the craft chocolate world and how one becomes a chocolate expert, at least in my case. Uh, so that's a little bit about what brings me here to you today. In terms of tasting our chocolates, I'll tell you the order. On your scorecard, we're going to work from right to left. So we're going to start with the Diego's Leche. So I would get that one ready. And then after that, we're going to have the Dalileo. And then I would end with Fernando's. Excuse me if I can get that right. I would end with Fernando's because it's the most complex in terms of its flavor profile. So I'm going to show you a little trick with opening the Diego's chocolate. This is kind of one that I cut up for samples for an event yesterday. But on the end here, on either end, doesn't matter which one, you can kind of rip the wrapper and twist around, and then that should allow you to slide the rest of the chocolate out in its wax paper from the tissue paper. Notice, by the way, on the labels that they are hand colored. All of our chocolates have these lovely hand colored labels showing Lake Atitlan. And that keeps our employees working extra hours and gives every chocolate a nice little handmade touch. So I want to show you how to taste chocolate. So I'm going to demonstrate this with the Diegos, and then you can more or less follow the same process with the other chocolates. Okay? So if you unwrap the Diegos from its wax paper, you can break off a small piece. And the first thing I try to do is take a big smell of the chocolate when it's recently been split or opened. And this works really well with the other chocolates that we're going to try tonight too. So like those will have a nice snap to them, which will explain why that happens later. And when that snap happens, definitely a good time to take a nice deep inhale because you'll get those lovely aromas and notes of the cacao. So when you taste chocolate, and after this, we're gonna go into the scorecard real quick, and I'll explain it for you. The best thing to do is chew a little bit, but don't like munch it all the way. You don't want to chew it up really quickly. You want to let it kind of melt in your mouth and coat your palate while also chewing. And now, if you look at the scorecard, there's basically 4 categories where we left you spaces to jot down your notes that are specific, one for additional general notes, and then like an overall rating. So for appearance and color, one interesting fact about craft chocolate is that there's no one color that indicates a better made chocolate than the other. They can be all a range of different colors depending on the roasting profile and the beans. But one thing that is consistent is that some of the lower quality like chocolates that you might find in the supermarket tend to have a very, very dark color because they roast the beans to a very, very high degree to get a uniform flavor across them. And in the craft chocolate world, you see more of a variation of color. So see if you see that variation between the three chocolates tonight. So take a look at the appearance and color. What kind of flavors and aromas do you get? For example, with the Diegos, these are beans from a region in Guatemala called Laguna La Chua, and the cacao there is known for its citric acidity. It's kind of got nice hints of like tropical fruit and like tangy berries. Some even say black tea. It's a really much loved bean by chocolate makers all over the world, not just ourselves at Diego's, and we're very happy to have this relationship with the farm. Texture and melt. So different chocolates will have different textures. You'll notice that Diego's is very soft. The other ones will be hard, and they will melt at different rates in your mouth. So take note, was it short, medium, long in terms of a melt? And then those tastes and aromas that you got in the beginning, how long did they last? Like what was the length like? Was there like kind of like a peak and then a downturn? What was the finishing process of the tasting experience like? You'll often get different tastes at the end of your swallowing and chewing. And don't forget to take a drink of water in between your different chocolates to cleanse your palate. So that same process of snap, smell, little chew, melts in the mouth, you can follow that with the Dalileo chocolate and the Fernando's chocolate, which I would suggest doing last. And these are three different chocolates with really interesting variations to them. Let's see. Okay, so talking about, we're going to turn our attention to the slides here. These are just some photos of Diego and his team. There's about 8 to 15 people working, depending on the time of the year. Again, this is in San Pedro La Laguna, where the production is, but we have 2 retail stores in San Pedro, as well as San Juan La Laguna, which is the neighboring town over there on the west side of Lake Atitlan. And all the chocolates are made there, packaged there, with 100% Guatemalan ingredients, and I'm sure that's the case with the other chocolates that we're trying tonight as well. So it's really cool, really special. It's not often that you find chocolates that are made in the country where their cacao grows. Like that's really special because it keeps those value-added dollars in the country. It's way more it's way less, excuse me, of an impact on the environment because the ingredients have to travel much smaller distances before they're made into their final product. And what's cool is we get access when we make chocolate in countries like Guatemala to all these amazing different flavor ingredients like the spices that are in Fernando's chocolate and the panela, like the sugar that I think all three of us use here. Again, locally, more or less directly from the farmers. It's a joy and it's special and it continues this cool Mayan history of chocolate production. So speaking of chocolate production, can we go to the next slide, please? So this is a really helpful visual put together some years ago. Shout out to chocolatenoise.com and the École Chocolat out in Vancouver, Canada. What we have here is a visual explanation of how chocolate is produced before it ever even gets to the chocolate maker. So we're really just talking about the beans here, the cacao beans. As you can see in number 1, cacao beans grow on trees. What's interesting is they grow in what's called a cauliflory manner, meaning that they don't just grow off the branches like the outer branches, like say apples or pears. They can grow all up and down the trunk on any type of branch, and they can mature and fruit at various different times. In fact, in that little photo, I don't know if you can see, there's little flowers sticking out of the trunk of the tree, as well as fully formed pods. And fun fact, cacao only grows 20 degrees north and south of the equator, at least in any manner that it can be harvested in quantity. So that's why cacao always comes from tropical countries. So number two shows you what happens when you harvest. So I keep go back to the, yeah. So we're going to stick on the slide. In number two here, the pod is split open. Inside are the beans. And we ate one of those beans earlier today. The beans at first are covered in this white, sweet, sticky, sugary pulp. And that pulp is used in the fermentation process, which you see in number three. Beans are fermented in a big brown wooden box for about 1 to 2 weeks. It depends on where you are and what kind of beans you are using. But that fermentation process is really important to the flavor profile. It's where the aromas of the cacao beans really start to develop and take shape. After they're fermented, they have to be dried for anywhere from a week to 10 days because you want an optimal level of humidity, moisture inside the beans. If they're too wet, they can get moldy, and if they're too dry, they're not going to be as usable for making chocolate. Next slide, please. So now we're at the point where the cacao beans, excuse me, have reached the chocolate maker. So the first step for any chocolate maker is roasting. And at Diego's Chocolate, Diego roasts his cacao beans over a wood fire. He does it very traditionally, the same way his grandmother taught him how to do it, using like a hollowed out gourd or jicara to move the cacao beans. You want to get a nice even roast. It takes a very skilled hand and a lot of knowledge to do that so well. After the beans are roasted, they have to be cracked, which is what we did before. It's actually a little bit easier after they've been roasted and cooled. So the team cracks them and removes the shell from the beans. And then we have the nibs, which is, the deshelled bean. At that point, we grind the beans once, we use the same machine that they use all over Guatemala to grind their corn into masa to make corn flour. So we use that machine to grind the cacao, and then we mix it with panela, which is unrefined evaporated cane juice. And then number four is the interesting step here. So Diego's Chocolate does not do any tempering. He is never really learned how to do it. He doesn't have the machinery, and if you temper the chocolate, it would not be soft, and it would not be in these beautiful roll forms. So Diego's Chocolate is an untempered chocolate, whereas the other two that you're going to taste, Galileo and Fernando's, are tempered chocolate. And that tempering is kind of a European innovation, let's say, that came about in the I believe late 18th and 19th centuries, but it was not something that was a part of the Mayan culture of chocolate consumption. So you've really got a full array of different chocolate products that showcase the variety you have in production methods, but all within our beautiful little country of Guatemala here. So you see all this work that has to go into making just one chocolate bar. It's truly a labor of love for the farmers, the people involved in the supply chain, the chocolate makers, and of course, us consumers. All right, and you guys are our consumers are why we do what we do. And we really appreciate the fact that you coming and learning about craft chocolate with us. And I'll be here for the rest of the night to answer any questions.
So you all don't need to rush through the chocolate tasting. You can go at your own pace today because we of course have this other portion of the program. So take it easy, don't rush, and just savor every bite of that chocolate. I know it's all delicious. So thank you, Nico. And I'll also be taking notes because we are going to return to Nico at the end of our program. And if you have any questions that come up, you can write those down and Nico will be on hand to answer some questions. So, how many of you have been to Antigua, Guatemala? Just wave your hand around if you have. How many of you have visited during Lent and seen a Lenten procession? Wave your hand if you've ever seen a Lenten procession. Yeah, there are some. Before I lived there, it was definitely a bucket list item for me. And uh, it is really a treat to see a Lenten procession. And you're going to get to see a little bit of that now. So at SEDEPCA, we take our education seriously. So we've invited Elizabeth Bell, one of the premier historians of Antigua, Guatemala, to share with you about this amazing tradition of Lenten and Holy Week processions. It is truly my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth today. Elizabeth Bell and I met when my family started attending the Episcopal Church in Antigua in 2022. Elizabeth was a lay leader and a very welcoming presence in that community. My family and I were newbies to Antigua, but Elizabeth has lived in Antigua since 1969 when she moved from Palo Alto, California at the age of 14. Elizabeth worked at the National Council for the Protection of Antigua, Guatemala from 1978 to 1986 as a pioneer in the first restoration team. In 1979, Antigua was included in the UNESCO World Heritage Site list. And since that time, history, preservation, and tourism, helping others appreciate the beauty of Antigua, has been Elizabeth's life, work, and passion. She has authored 3 major books on Antigua and has been conducting cultural tours through her company, Antigua Tours, since 1992. So please help me welcome Elizabeth Bell.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. And it's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I'd just like to mention before we get started, Betsy, I was actually asked to write this book. I was doing some research over at CIRMA, which is a local library, and about Antigua. And the director came up to me and said, well, can I talk to you? And I was a little nervous because I was much younger in the day. And he said, could you write a book about Holy Week? And I looked at him and I couldn't say no, but I'm going through my mind saying, wow, how am I ever going to pull this off? Because all of my photos of Antigua then were still black and white. That's how long ago it was. So indeed, over the years, I've had the pleasure of putting information together, but also tips so that you can enjoy Holy Week, because you can either get behind the crowds and not enjoy it at all or have a spectacular time. So what I'd like to do this evening is to bring to life a lot of devotion that people have contributed to the city. As Betsy mentioned, I'm Episcopalian. So although I've been here for 50 years, much of this was definitely a learning process, and it's absolutely spectacular. So I have some notes here that I'm going to refer to, but please feel free to ask me any questions that you may have. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of sharing the highlights of the largest celebration in the world for Lent. Lenten and Holy Week traditions were brought to Guatemala by the conquerors in 1524 and were inspired from Seville, Spain. They arrived in Antigua, then known as Santiago de Guatemala, in 1543, and have flourished over the centuries. Holy Week in Guatemala was declared an intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO in 2022. Antigua, Guatemala is located 45 kilometers from Guatemala City today, but I found it interesting that we used to think that people would just go through the Caribbean that you can see to get to Spain. Indeed, there were too many illnesses on the coast and British pirates. So although they would export their products, and the main product was cacao, because that's what the Spanish taxed. Since they found no gold when they came to Guatemala, they used chocolate and later cochineal, which is a dye. Moving their products that way, they would not go to Spain that way. People would first go up to Mexico City by land, over to Veracruz, then go by boat to Havana, and then depending on the hurricanes, go over to Seville, Spain, which was the only port of entry at that time to Europe. So this geographical isolation contributed to the mestizaje, or mixture, in the local culture. And we used to think it was just Spanish and the Maya, but indeed now we're learning much, much more about the Black residents that were imported in slavery and then mixed in with the local culture. So what we have is a tremendous richness. And we also have two basic cultures right now. So one is Ladino. This is not a derogatory term. Ladino means basically your Spanish culture, but never been to Spain. And then, of course, we have the Maya, and the Maya are half of the population in Guatemala. So as we continue on to Antigua, Antigua was the capital of Guatemala from 1543 to 1773, when the capital was moved to present-day Guatemala City. It was from the royal palace that we see here in the photo that they governed Guatemala, which included the area from southern Mexico to Costa Rica. Panama was part of Colombia. So today we say Centroamérica y Panamá, as it was kind of an add-on when they built the canal. But the captain general, the governor, was appointed by the King of Spain. So separate from Mexico, indeed. Today, the architecture is spectacular. The colonial buildings, including 2 governmental palaces, 38 Catholic churches, and many houses remain today. Antigua, with a preservation law since 1969, which happened to be the year that I came here, was included in the UNESCO World Heritage Site List, as Betsy mentioned, and that was in 1979. A view from the second floor of the City Hall here, today used by the mayor and the offices, is spectacular and reflects the earthquake architecture built by Guatemalan architects centuries ago. One of my favorite photos is this. It's from a painting from 1678. And you can see kind of in the foreground there, the park, the Central Park, and the genre of all the people with Spanish, criollos, black slaves, Mayas, and so forth. And with the details of the construction of the new cathedral at that time. The bell tower in the back was built prior to this, and that was a bad idea. Too tall, it actually fell down in the first earthquake. So the architecture in Antigua was low and squat because of the earthquakes that we have. But also to point out here with this photo, we thought when I moved here 50 years ago that all of the buildings were built by the Spanish. Well, only 2 of the palaces were. I think in one of the doors you can see a man there. And the architect of the cathedral, Joseph de Porres, was actually part Black, part Maya, and part Spanish descent. So that shows the cultural mix that we have here. Continuing on, we have by moving the capital to in 1773, the city's architecture was frozen in time as the entire city lay abandoned for many years. Very few new residents moved in from surrounding areas throughout the 1800s. And the first photographer, Edward Muybridge, and this is one of his photos, and his collection is at Stanford University today, shows us truly how abandoned the city was in 1875 when the photo was taken. And this is the market, but indeed at the market with many people from surrounding areas coming in. So as we continue on for Holy Week, the Lenten traditions were so vivid in colonial times, and they were also moved to Guatemala City in 1773. And Antigua was procession-free for 50 years. They slowly began in Antigua again in the early 1800s and have grown in size over the centuries. So as you can see here in the photo, you can see the float. The floats now are like for 100 people, 100 carriers, and this float is for 12. They still use the same Christ figure in one of the processions, but they were just little tiny processions and very, very few people left in Antigua in the 1800s to carry out the activities. So with the black and white photo we're going to see next, we can also see that these are a few more people here, but the activities are organized by the Hermandades, and these are Catholic brotherhoods and sisterhoods with parishioners dedicated to different processional sculptures and the activities dedicated to each. So people think that these activities are organized by the church. Actually, they're not. For example, here you have the Christ figure that's going to be on display actually day after tomorrow for Ash Wednesday. So the Hermandad's function isn't based on the sculpture, not necessarily the church. But today, there are more than 50 activities during Lent, which is a 40-day season beginning with Ash Wednesday, again this Wednesday, through Easter Sunday. Here we're looking at a holy vigil known as a velación, and they're absolutely spectacular. The various decorations in each church depict a biblical message with the processional sculpture on display a couple days prior to the procession. This is actually the same Christ figure that we saw in the black and white photo before. And this Christ figure was made in Antigua in 1650. So we have the sawdust carpet right there, as we see it also in this photo. And these are made with stencils, as we're going to see. Another depiction here in the church. But indeed, sawdust carpets surrounded with the fruits and vegetables and flowers that represent the garden that Jesus visited before crucifixion, which is Gethsemane. So some people, I think what we like to do is to create a cultural blend of everything. And I know it's difficult not to do that. Some people say, well, these are Maya offerings and so forth. There might be some overlap, of course, because you have local fruits and vegetables. But the message here is the garden that Jesus visited. And these are all made, this velación was made overnight by the brotherhood that is in charge of it. As we see another one here, here we have the one that we were speaking about. And then, of course, the next one, which is a different velación. And we have, they're open to the public for one day. And velaciones are certainly well attended by locals and visitors alike. My favorite part of the season is carpet making. Absolutely. If the procession comes by your house, your friends and family invite themselves over to create a carpet in the street in front of your house. The carpet is made with dyed sawdust using stencils for designs, and other street carpets are made with flowers and other materials. And these are finished up moments before the procession walks over them. If you look up in the corner, you can see the gentleman who's actually, everybody knows everybody, so we actually know these people in the photo, but they're finishing up. You can see some of the design is just being finished. Then they'll pull up the boards and procession walks over it. So absolutely spectacular carpets, truly breathtaking. With processions every Sunday during Lent, the most elaborate street carpets are usually those closest to the church where the Hermandad is located. Each Hermandad takes turns throughout Lent for processional dates. And these carpets are truly works of art. They're just one after another, just absolutely breathtaking, as we have said. Residents are free to create their own design using different materials that they buy in the local market or find in their gardens. Here we have different flowers and also a local pod from a large palm tree called corozo. While I have not found a translation for the pod, it is very popular during this time of year and very fragrant. And these are, again, finished just moments before the procession is going to come right along and walk right over it. So with many street carpets that take hours to make and certainly have priority over any traffic as roads are closed. So how do you close a street? You literally take out a bench or anything you want. The traffic is coming. The car stops and says, well, why are you putting that out? And the answer is, I'm making a carpet. Oh my goodness. Everybody has to detour. That's it until the procession walks over it. So a little difficult to get around town, at least for vehicles, but certainly easier for pedestrians. And the streets throughout the processional route, again, are actually absolutely spectacular, particularly those on Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, and Good Friday for the processions. This is the Armas carpet, which is one of the most famous. And the Armas family has a hardware store off to the right, kind of behind well, just on the right-hand side. And they're just famous for their carpets. So one year I interviewed the kids who were making it, because I thought maybe they had like a computer paced out or something, what was going on. And I could appreciate how just organic it is. So you had some kids working in the center first, then the border on each side, and then continuing on the way out. And they took, I think, 17 hours to create this carpet. So that's always one of the highlights. And here you can also see the cardboard stencils with wooden frames that are used for the most intricate designs. The word in Spanish for a carpet is alfombra. It's of Arabic origin, dating back to Seville, Spain. And I think many of these look like Persian carpets indeed. The young and the old who participate in street carpet making are not necessarily Catholic. People of all faiths and spiritual backgrounds are welcome to participate. And you can see the bags in the back with the dyed sawdust, these little kids who have actually grown up by now, having fun making the different designs. And indeed, everyone has fun with unique designs from year to year. This street carpet was made by a 10-year-old boy and his father, and he was so excited about it. He had little handouts of the meaning of the carpet. Again, these are all going to disappear as soon as the procession walks over them. And all carpets are of equal importance. This local resident was dedicated to her carpet year after year. She brought to me, I'm going to talk about a Semana Santa moment in a little while, but this was one for me. You can see no hose for her to water down the street. She has a watering can. She's good. Her stencil is kind of doubled over her bag of sawdust. Her broom, of course, but indeed absolutely of equal importance than the big fancy ones. Holy Week begins on Palm Sunday and goes through Easter Sunday. Celebrations for Holy Week include this procession, which is called a borriquita, a small procession on Palm Sunday with groups with a person who represents Jesus on a donkey as other participants go around town early in the morning. You can see people smiling. That's kind of fun in the morning. So the Stations of the Cross also appear on the processional routes, and these mark the steps that Jesus took on his way to crucifixion, and they actually measure 1,321 steps. So you cannot ask for a Station of the Cross in front of your house. It depends on the processional route and where that's going. The main highlights of Holy Week begin with the national holiday on Wednesday noon through Easter Sunday, and the crowds in the colonial capital increase. Here is a fabulous photo of the sawdust carpet made by the Hermandad at San Francisco Church for the Wednesday Velación in preparation for the Maundy Thursday procession. And Maundy Thursday, which is the day before Good Friday, is enhanced with the fabulous procession departing from the church with this sculpture, and the Christ figure is 1630. And these were all made by Guatemalans. And with thousands of participants, you have a great dedication to each sculpture. The main attraction, I think, with these sculptures, particularly of Jesus of Nazareth, is the glass eyes that look right at you. So that's where you exactly want to take your photo. So indeed, most of the sculptures are 300-400 years old. And on on Maundy Thursday, we also have the sentencing, and we have this display. Well, first you have to put Jesus, so to speak, in jail before the sentencing. And it may seem theatrical, but every activity is created with great humility and reverence. Different hermandades organize different processions. Thousands of participants sign up months in advance and are given turn numbers based on each one's shoulder height. Here you can see the number 2 and the second turn gathering right there. So a turn is a block number, and then you get your shoulder number for depending on how many places there are on the float. So again, gathering there, the carriers known as cucuruchos and cargadoras switch turns at each corner as they make their way through the 12-hour route. The men carry the wooden float of the Jesus of Nazareth, and the women carry the float of the Virgin Mary. And here we have one of the smaller floats, at least small for us, I think it's on the shoulders of 60 men. The larger floats are on the shoulders up to 100 men right now, which make it difficult to turn the corners. And indeed, they get new decorations from year to year. And the decorations are made with styrofoam, except for the Christ figure of the Virgin Mary. And these make them lighter weight, but don't kid yourself. The men carriers are carrying about 80 pounds per shoulder, and the women are going to carry about 50 or 60 pounds. And again, that's going to be a block. So in front of the float, you can see the carpet that was made by the neighbors right there, and different flowers, pine needles and flowers. I can see that one was made of. So everybody's going to walk around the carpet until the float of Jesus walks right over it, and then it's blessed. Guatemala has the finest Spanish-American colonial art, according to the experts at the Louvre in Paris, with extremely expressive facial expressions. Glass eyes bring them to life, as I mentioned. And many were made here in the 1650s. They are all made out of cedar, covered with plaster, paint, and varnish, and have real hair. And now we have the fun with the sentencing. Early morning, Good Friday, the Roman soldiers are out reading the sentence. They're going around the processional route, being very careful to walk around the carpets that are being made as they read it. And this precedes the Good Friday procession from La Merced. And local farms are honored in supplying the horses and very experienced horsemen. I like the helmet. This is the La Merced helmet. He's upgraded to feathers, but sometimes they have kind of like a chicken feathers, if you know, or whisk brooms helmets, like brooms, just broom helmets. So this is actually an upgrade. And indeed, the procession also has Roman soldiers. These are different. A little bit later in the Good Friday morning, and they're again going around the carpets. They're not reading the sentencing, as you can see. They're what I call a preamble to the procession that's on its way coming down the street. The position for the thieves and Pontius Pilate are also specially chosen. Nobody really wants to be Pontius Pilate, so they have to hire someone. And indeed, for the thieves, it's a 9-hour procession. So you can imagine going around for 9 hours carrying the cross. So those 3 are paid positions. Everything else, of course, is volunteer people signing up in advance. And as we continue on, you have the best view, as I mentioned, of the Jesus of Nazareth sculpture, always on the right-hand side. If you get on the other side of the sculpture, you're getting respectfully the hair and the cross. You're not getting the look. And this float is from La Merced and carried on the shoulders of 80 men at a time. And here we go into strategy. Street corners. First of all, you want to pick your location, right-hand side of the procession. And also, I like corners because it gives me a little more mobility. And it also gives me time to, when I want to move any place, I'm not stuck against a house until the end of the procession. But these offer a bit mobility, and also the scent of incense shows us that the procession is near. The sculpture of the Virgin Mary follows about a block behind the Christ figures and is carried by women, and again, are of equal importance. Children's processions have also become very popular over the last few decades, and these are also organized by the Hermandades and have child-sized figures of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. After viewing the procession, we're off to catch some more street carpet viewing. There are at least 4 processions on Good Friday and 2 more of the Virgin Mary on Saturday. And then we get into the crowds. One of the tips is to know where the procession's going to be, to either see it and or avoid it because of the crowd. So once you're like right here, which is the beginning of the processions, you can see the cross right in the beginning, and they're carrying the flowers. That is where you determine exactly where you're going to be about for the next 45 minutes as the procession comes by. But with all the crowds and activities, perhaps what we're looking for is the Semana Santa moment that I referred to. It may be, for me, for example, when the little kids were making the carpet, or when I saw another year the older woman making the carpet, or I remember this float as we see in the photo going into La Merced, right in front of the church, big yellow church. It turned around to go in backwards because they have to lower it and get it through the door. And there was a gust of wind. And I'm talking about like 11 o'clock at night. So it just seemed very mystical at that time. Perhaps it's when you see carpet making, or there's just that one moment, perhaps with the sense of the incense, or of course the music that we're going to hear in the YouTube that we're going to view later with the one that Betsy sent us. But indeed, these are huge processions going through the town, many of them lit up at night with movable generators. And there's just one moment when you feel it's almost like a funeral, particularly with the next photo, which is the Good Friday procession after 3 p.m. And what I'd like to do is to share with you a couple photos without a narrative to see if you get a sense of Holy Week. And indeed, Semana Santa is mostly a feeling, sometimes difficult to explain. For the funeral march bands, they're hired by the various hermandades and play throughout the route, keeping the carriers in step to more than 100 marches by Guatemalan composers. All of the locals know these different songs. I didn't grow up here. I moved here when I was 14. So I know the beat, but I don't know the names of them, as all locals do. And processions, as I mentioned, take up to 12 hours. So it's a good gig. I understand that if you're a piccolo player, you're making like 300 quetzales an hour, which is a good gig at 12 hours for a procession. But I also know that many of the drummers are volunteers. So what happens with the carpets? After the procession walks over them, each is swept up, as you can see here. Tons and tons of carpets, of sawdust and flowers are cleaned up in a matter of moments. In English, you would say that the carpets are destroyed. In Spanish, we don't have that concept. Each is simply cleaned up. And finally, Easter Sunday is celebrated with a small procession from the local Franciscan hospital, Obras Sociales del Santo Hermano Pedro, and many other activities from local churches. The smaller allegorical processions remind us that the resurrection of Christ remains the main theme. So thank you so much. And here's a cover of my Lenten Holy Week book in Antigua. It's a bilingual publication. And I hate to put in a plug for Amazon, but it's available on Amazon, but more importantly in local bookstores. And also we've been dedicated to cultural tourism since we started in 1992, and that was with the black and white photos. Indeed, things have come to color over the decades, but truly dedicated to improving the quality of life to everyone in our local community of Antigua, which also includes not the historical center only, but 23 villages that are part of Antigua. And I believe that we have encouraged that over the last 30, 40 years, improving not only the educational level, the lower birth rate, but also just as we maintain our sense of community. Thank you very much.
What a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, we do have some time for questions. So I'm wondering, okay, I see some. What are the sculptures made of?
Yes, all the sculptures are made of cedar, which is termite proof, covered with plaster, paint, and varnish. And then the glass eyes, some have eyelashes, and then real hair. So that's how they have lasted for 400 or 500 years.
Wow. And then another question is carrying the processional float considered a penitential act?
For some people it is, but not for everyone. For example, my account is in every single procession, and I'm talking about like 8 processions during Lent. He grew up doing that. For him, it's a tradition. It's just what he does. And he sees family and he sees friends, and that's what they do growing up. If you grow up, that's what you do. I would say that for some, maybe one year it's penance. Maybe the next year it's not. Maybe the next year they're just doing it because that's what they're doing, to see their friends and family. Or maybe it depends on the personal year that they had. Maybe they lost a loved one. I've seen this with the women particularly. Maybe they lost for example, their mother. And so that particular year would mean more for them as they carry the Virgin Mary. And it's inner kind of, you can see them reflecting. It's a quiet moment for the block, but it means something different for each person, for each year. It kind of changes from year to year.
We had a question from Terry saying, I noticed Soledad. Are there other virgins represented?
Yes, this is actually the Dolorosa, which is Soledad. So she has the dagger in her heart, which is representing the pain that she felt by losing her son. So the other sculptures behind her is the Mary Magdalena. That's a virgin, but not the Virgin Mary, and Saint John. So there are other figures, but it's all about Jesus of Nazareth, or the Christ figure, the buried Christ, and always the Virgin Mary.
What are the purple robes? Why the purple robes?
Purple is the color for Lent, and it is passion. So you wear purple up until Good Friday, then you wear black. All the robes are in black on a Good Friday, absolutely no colors. And then, of course, white on Easter Sunday. So jacarandas are not local from here. I think they came from Africa. I'm not sure where, but they bloom this time of year. So everyone just loves, all the trees are purple right now. Many of the jacarandas, we have so many of them in Antigua, and they're all purple.
Do only the men wear purple?
Yes. Women, let me see, back up. The men have robes. You can buy them and you can hand them down, or you can, you just make them, and you can wear them from year to year if you'd like. The women's attire is much more simple for the economic. So what they do is they have kind of a format like black and white uniforms. Everyone has black and white clothes because of funerals. So they'll say maybe a black skirt and a white blouse, or maybe all black, for example. But it's not like it's like any clothes that you have there that color.
Anyone who wants to can wear a purple robe. You don't have to be like a holy, like.
No. In fact, you like the little kids, like my accountant, he's already getting his 4-year-old these little cucuruchito robes, and they love it. Yeah, so you just have them made at the hardware store that I mentioned. You can go and get you order them in advance. Yeah, so it's not, they're just lay people. It's just like anybody can sign up and join. I would say you'd have to be Catholic to carry, although I know some foreigners who carry anyway. There's no requirement to religious requirement to carry. So you pay a few quetzales, like for the cathedral, it's 20 quetzales, which is like $3. And that money goes for the decorations and also to pay the band.
And then a question about how heavy the children's processional floats are.
Yeah, the procession, La Merced, is 80 shoulders, 7,000 pounds. What happens is the smaller floats are not as heavy. The larger floats, when you're getting above 60 carriers, they need metal braces underneath because of the torque. So per shoulder, they're heavier than the smaller floats. By small, I mean like 40 people.
Okay, and even the children's floats, are they made from special material so that the kids don't have to carry the...
A lot of moms help out, indeed. The smaller floats for the kids are also heavy. excuse me, but they don't have the big metal braces. So if you have like a little float, it's not that heavy. Although I would point out that for the little kids, there are always moms helping out. And you also have people underneath, kind of lifting it up a little bit to make sure it goes down the street. A little underneath support.
Final question, just because we're out of time for questions, but parades just on the weekends during Lent?
Right now we have every Sunday. Then when you get up to Holy Week, which again is Palm Sunday, we're looking at processions almost every single day.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. This was just super interesting.
So much.
Yeah, and it probably created a lot of curiosity and a desire to go to Antigua during Lent.
Come before Palm Sunday, before the crowds, because we have processions every Sunday. You can email me, contact me. I can give you information so that you can truly enjoy it and maybe avoid Good Friday, which is super, super jam-packed.
Mm-hmm. My family, we're traveling to Guatemala this coming week. We leave on Thursday, so we're hoping we'll get to see a procession on Sunday.
Oh yeah, we have one from Santa Catarina, Bobadilla.
So
I can say, Betsy, that Elizabeth does great tours anytime you're there. I was there in October, and we did the Kite Festival tour with her in Sumpongo. So anytime you're there, just contact her and she can hook you up with any kind of tour you want. It's amazing.
I'm going to let you continue with your delicious chocolate tasting, and I'm going to wish everyone a very good night.
Okay, bye, Elizabeth.
Bye.
So Elizabeth really brought up so much of the beauty and the traditions that are a part of Guatemalan life and culture. But there is so much more to learn and to love about Guatemala. And that's kind of where SEDEPCA comes in. So as many of you know, SEDEPCA does intercultural encounters for travelers. And that's one part of the greater ministry of SEDEPCA. There are so many difficult realities in Guatemala, in addition to the beauty and the tradition. Guatemala faces climate-related disasters, economic instability, gender inequity, and at SEDEPCA, courageous, passionate leaders are confronting these realities and with an education that transforms. So I brought a video that was recently put together that highlights some of the ministry work that SEDEPCA has been up to in the last year. And so be ready to be inspired. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully, if you cannot hear, please speak up. Carrie, will you help me with that?
2024 was a great year here in SEDEPCA, filled with God's presence and provision. We are grateful for those who have partnered with us here in Guatemala and want to let you know about the transformative work that you have been supporting.
In our biblical and theological education program, men and women from diverse areas of Guatemala have been learning how to lead their communities in ways that bring hope and liberation. We teach a theological perspective not traditionally found in other local seminaries, a theology that lifts up the gifts of all people, promotes nonviolence, and honors creation. Our materials teaching new masculinities grounded in biblical texts, as well as our annual Advent devotional, this year focused on migration, reach a wide international audience. Our staff also collaborated with leaders from rural areas to redesign the curriculum used with local theology students. We are proud to use this material that is relevant and contextual. In women's ministry, we celebrate that approximately 100 adult women took education courses, rereading the Bible through the lens of their own experience. We continue to offer Tamar and Jose retreats in which young women and young men learn a new way of being and relating. The 400 young people who attended retreats this year are breaking patterns of generational violence present in their families and communities. In October, 2 SEDEPCA staff people traveled to the Mid-Atlantic United States to bring Tamar and Jose materials to leaders who work with Guatemalan migrants. Our disaster ministry staff reach leaders throughout Latin America with an extended training course in psychosocial and spiritual support in times of crisis. We also accompanied people in tangible ways by bringing psychological first aid and by delivering food, hygiene, and psychosocial kits to those affected by fires and heavy rains. We were pleased to partner with North American churches in placing 268 eco-filters in homes and community spaces where clean water is in short supply. Thanks to the generous donations of friends and churches, SEDEPCA purchased 2 vehicles, a 4x4 utility vehicle and a van, which will be used to transport our facilitators and also deliver emergency items to vulnerable areas. Our Intercultural Encounters Ministry facilitated travel and learning experiences for 20 groups in 2024, many of which were intergenerational. Groups came to learn about women's issues, migration, education, and theology. We believe that the education SEDEPCA offers our North American visitors promotes actions of peace, justice, and advocacy.
We are grateful for your friendship, your donations, and your support in many ways. We hope and pray that we can continue doing the work of education that transform and that we can reach so many lives here in Guatemala and in the U.S.
So, you just heard from Judith or Judith Castañeda, the general coordinator of SEDEPCA, and she has joined us here. She's live in Guatemala City right now. And so, Judith, would you like to say a few words to all of our guests here?
No, first, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for being part of this family. And for sure, we hope to see you in person here in Guatemala and join us in these different activities of the 4 programs that we are doing in the country and of course, in future virtual journeys. So thank you.
So, we have come to the end of our time tonight. It's been an awesome time, but first I want to go back to Nico. I almost forgot. Nico, do you want to see what kind of reactions to our chocolate that we got?
Yeah, now that everyone's had a chance to taste everything and note your thoughts down on the scorecard, I would love to hear some reactions. You can unmute yourself and pipe in or write in the chat if you'd like. Either way. Personally speaking, yeah, I was really impressed by Fernando's chocolate, like that mix of anise and cardamom and allspice and vanilla and everything he's got in there was really, really something. Yes, I see Cheryl agrees.
And for me, that Galileo's was like the smoothest chocolate I think I've ever had. It was just buttery.
Melted really well, right? There's like a great mouthfeel with the Galileo. And buttery, that's a good word. Yeah, because they add cocoa butter, I believe, which really gives that nice texture.
I'm a big fan of Fernando's. Having been in his shop, I think, Betsy, you were there when we were able to had the first taste of cacao beans, which I don't need to do anymore, but I'll eat his chocolate till the end of time. For sure.
I like Fernando's. I had to try some before we were supposed to, and it said sexy orange on it. And I tried it and it was like, okay, I can taste the orange and I could taste it way after. Now it's been different now trying this time, all of them. And I didn't really understand when you said you have to take water, but drink a little water, but now I do. And it tastes so wonderful.
That's great. Yeah, the water really does help kind of give you like a 0 point to start from again so you can get a fresh flavor experience and different ingredients mixed with the chocolate and different beans even from within Guatemala as we're seeing can have different flavors.
I
Yeah,
really like.
I see that people are noting the different textures between the chocolates, which is really I think a fun part of tonight's event. Fernando seems to be a standout. Thank you, Deborah, about the texture of Diego's.
I mean, I'd like to put in a good word for Diego's. And it's much more, it's much less complex than Fernando's, definitely. But I do like the fruity flavor and I like that crumbly texture. Top. I mean, it's a really unique chocolate.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it really is singular in that way. And one tip I wanted to give to you guys about Diego's, I think works best with ours. If you freeze our chocolate rolls, they can shave really well with like a fine grater, microplane. Or you can grate it over ice cream or coffee or baked goods, whatever you want. Thank you, sir. Thank you, David.
Okay, so we've got some more. You can keep putting your comments in the chat. Uh, I just have a couple more slides to share, so let me go back. But thank you again, Nico, for just guiding us through that and for introducing us to the wonder of cacao, helping us just have such a great experience tonight. Okay, just a couple more slides. So I want to thank you all for coming and just acknowledge that you are all partnering with SEDEPCA by being here. And you are, in reality, a part of this work, God's work, of building a more just world and promoting life in abundance. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the donation that you've already made, and just your presence here, your friendship with SEDEPCA, even knowing about SEDEPCA and the work they do is so valuable to SEDEPCA to be known and seen. And so strengthened by your partnership, SEDEPCA is going to keep doing their work of empowering men and women in Central America to live their best life and promote abundance or just abundant life and justice in their own communities. So this is a QR code here. If you want to make an additional donation tonight, this is going to take you straight to our donate page. If you came as a part of a party and you had a host that paid for the chocolate and you say, I want to contribute, you can point your phone right at the screen and it'll take you to the donation website. When you reserved a spot for tonight's event, a $30 donation was made to SEDEPCA, and that was already included in your registration. So thank you already for that. And the good news is that we've already raised $5,000 for SEDEPCA. And that's awesome that just on this virtual event that was a lot of fun, we also got to raise $5,000 while doing it. So if you would like to make an additional donation to build on this, we would welcome that. We are hoping to raise an additional $2,000. So you can help us get there by going to that donation page. Also, this donation page, just so you know, it's going to take you to our general contributions page. The contributions to the general fund are really the most helpful for SEDEPCA because they can determine as a board, as a staff, how to put those funds to use. There are different emphases throughout the ministry that they'll need funds for something. And if it's undesignated, that is so helpful for them. So you are going to be getting an email probably tomorrow with a recording of the event. If you'd like to watch it again, share it with somebody who couldn't be here tonight who wanted to be. And that email is going to have links for donating. It's going to have links to the chocolate, links to Elizabeth's book, and to the Antigua Tours website. So just feel free to share that follow-up email. But thank you again for your commitment, your love for the people of Guatemala and for CEDEPCA. It was so good to be here with you tonight, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
You too.